we're here to talk about Visual Studio tools for Apache Cordova. So everybody in the audience, put your hands in the air, wave them like you don't just care if you knew that Visual Studio actually supported Apache Cordova. A couple? Yeah? All right, sweet. So if you didn't know, this is a great opportunity to learn about it. But here's the deal. This is a super small room. There's not a whole lot of us in here, and that means that we get to have a relatively private conversation, subtracting, of course, this Janet Jackson mic that's across my cheek. It is, still intended to be essentially kind of a conversation and an opportunity both for us to share cool stuff with you that we've been working on, and for you guys to yay or boo it or give us feedback and let us know, hey, that's kind of not what I expected. You guys should do that differently. We care an awful lot, not just about building great tools for Apache Cordova, but also about building a great platform in Apache Cordova and making that really awesome and great for the community. So with MS Open Tech, our product team is kind of really deeply involved in trying to make it a better community overall. So let's make this a representation of that community, and let's have an honest, earnest conversation with each other. Having said that, my name is Ryan J. Salva. I am a product manager over at Visual Studio. With me on stage, I've got, you guys can talk into the mic if you want. That's Chuck Lance. Say hi, Chuck.
How's it going? I'm
Chuck,
also a product manager from Visual Studio.
Excellent, excellent. Dan.
I'm Dan Levine. I'm a dev on Visual Studio.
Brilliant. All right. So you've got solid product team representation here. This is your golden opportunity to talk with us. All right. So let's kind of get through this, and let's just kind of give an overview of what we mean when we say kind of tools for Apache Cordova on Visual Studio. So first, it is an extension to Visual Studio. It is not installed kind of in-box with Visual Studio today. If you are already a Visual Studio user, you need to go outside of, search the webs for Apache Cordova Visual Studio, and you'll find a download link pretty easily. We do have a vision that it will eventually be inside of Visual Studio, kind of built into it in box, but that's not where it's at today. It's also important to note that we're essentially in, I don't know, in the tech world, you'd maybe call it an alpha or a beta release. For Microsoft, we call it a CTP. But we've been releasing these CTPs pretty frequently. We first released back in June of this year, and since then we released, I believe, 4 times. 4 times? Yeah. And we're coming up on the 5th one here in within the next month, let's say. So we're coming at a really, really fast and furious pace because we're receiving a lot of good feedback, and that's sort of prompting us to make a lot of changes and to grow the product. Plus, in the early days, it's easy to make progress quickly. Unlike kind of the PhoneGap build service, it is optimized for building locally. So when you install the Visual Studio tools for Apache Cordova, it is intended for you to install the entire tool chain on your local machine. So that's Node and Git and Chrome and the Android SDK and all that good kind of stuff, right? So we actually we do the hard work for you and kind of help you get it all installed on your machine so that you don't have to go out there and deal with the myriad versions and configurations that are possible. If you do want to use a remote build service, like the Intel SDK guys, they've got a remote build service. Obviously, PhoneGap has got its remote build service. You can do that. It takes a little bit of extra work, but that is not what our tool is optimized for. So in terms of staying up to date with the latest versions of Cordova, thus far, we've actually been able to stay relatively in sync with new releases of Cordova as they become available. For the most part, within about a month after a new release of Cordova becomes available, we release an update to our tools, making it possible for you to use the entire IDE with that updated version of Cordova. So 4.0 just came out last week. Was that last week? Yeah. Time is weird. So you can imagine that we're going to have another release here within the next couple of weeks. It is an integrated dev environment, so unlike so many of us that are accustomed to using the CLI and just kind of a text editor and browser to do most of our development, Visual Studio brings with it all of the expectations of an IDE. That means that Code editing happens there, debugging happens there, build, package, and publish happens there. There's some great things about that, and there's some disadvantages to that. From a disadvantage standpoint, you maybe have a little bit less sort of minute and granular control than you have in the CLI, but you also kind of get click it and everything works for you kind of thing. And so from a productivity standpoint, that can be really, really helpful. We'll actually kind of go through what that means in a minute. The big kind of headline here, and the thing that I want to call attention to, is that Visual Studio includes debug tools for all deployment targets. So that means browsers, that means emulators, that means tethered devices, that means Windows, that means Android, and that means, well, there's a little star here for any deploy target because iOS debugging is available in the next release. Put 2 and 2 together, we might be releasing in the next month. You know when that might be available. So like that by itself, that you don't need to switch between the different tools in order to kind of debug against the multitude of different targets, it helps an awful lot. We're using completely publicly available standard APIs to connect to each of these debug targets. So there's nothing that we're doing that the Chrome Dev Tools or the IE F12 Dev Tools aren't already doing. We just have a lot of extra kind of features that are kind of built into the code editor so that you've got kind of better, oh my God, I'm about to use the word synergy. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so you got better synergy. I'm totally at a corporate event now, between the code environment and debugging itself. All right, cool. So that's enough slideware BS. Let's take a 10-minute tour here, right? Did everyone else watch Gilligan's Island when you were a kid? Yeah? It's awesome. All right, cool. So that's who is the professor? I'm Totes Gilligan. All right. So let's do this. So I've got a Visual Studio project open here, and actually, you know what? I'm not going to use an existing project. I'm just going to do it from File New. So let's do that.
And it's kind of as Ryan's going through here, one of the things to keep in mind is effectively what's happening here is we're underneath the hood actually using the Cordova CLI for everything we do. So
Let me interrupt you for just 1 sec. I want to make sure that this is captured for posterity.
Yeah.
So make sure you get the mic, otherwise the camera won't get
Yes.
the audio.
All right.
All right, sweet. Thanks, buddy.
So yeah, we're using the Cordova CLI for every action we're doing. We're not kind of going off the beaten path. And so there's effectively each of these gestures essentially decomposes down into a Cordova CLI command that happens at build time. And so we can talk about what those commands are as we go through here. Obviously, creating a new project is Cordova create. But other commands as we kind of go through here, we can talk about as well.
I'm just making the text bigger for everyone.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Anybody know where text, here it is, general, all languages? Yeah, here we go. We'll just, whoa, it's huge. Awesome. Okay.
That was like an extreme close-up. Yeah.
It was. All right. So we just said File New. What is File New from a CLI perspective?
Cordova create.
That's simple. Okay.
Yes, that
cool.
one's simple.
All right. Okay, so we got a new project open. Let's just kind of do a quick build, right?
Okay.
In this case, I'm going to deploy to Ripple because, hey, it's fast, it's easy, it's awesome. All the kids are doing it these days. Ripple, sweet.
So what we effectively do here, you can kind of see this happening in the output window here, is we actually chain together a series of Cordova CLI commands to make this a little easier for you to do. We actually create a CLI project underneath the covers. We then, if there are any plugins installed, we add those at the same time. And then we fire up Ripple behind the scenes and point it at that target. So we actually did a CLI prepare underneath the covers here to get all the plugins set up to be able to be used inside of Ripple. And so
Cool.
pop that
Yeah.
out, and there you go.
And so when we do that that build, that's actually, as I understand it, that is when all of the CLI commands are actually executed.
That's
so like
correct. Yep.
as I'm going through back over in Visual Studio, doing whatever I'm going to do, I'm adding in plugins, things like that. I'm not actually acquiring the plugin at the moment that I do it. I wait until I do a build, and then I kind of get a batch of all of them.
Yep, that's currently how we have things set up. Yeah. You
All
got
right,
it.
cool. So does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Does that feel comfortable? Yeah? Heads nodding? Okay, sweet. All right, so since I did a build to Ripple, let's just kind of go back over here and validate that, hey, look, we really truly are kind of attaching the debugger here, right? So if I want to, at this point, I'm going to kind of make that guy a little bit smaller and this guy a little bit bigger. Yoink, right? So from here, I can, from within the debugger, just like I would with any one of the dev tools, I can actually kind of come down and highlight different objects in there. And since this is Ripple, like I'm highlighting stuff that's in the kind of the parent window, if you will. But I can drill down to the iframe itself where the actual web view, or the simulation of the web view is happening. Did it just find it? I lost my... The text is so small. Oh, it's up here. Yeah. Oh, there we are. Yeah, sweet. All right. So I can go in there and I can do all the things that you'd normally expect, right? We've all done this before. My awesome application is running, right? And it updates there. Exactly what you'd expect. Okay, cool. So we know kind of how that works. Let's actually, let's kind of go through the process of adding in a couple of plugins.
And actually, before we get there, does
Yeah.
everybody know what Ripple is and what it does? I don't know. We kind of skipped over that.
Yeah, Ripple. Okay, let's talk about Ripple for those maybe who need a little bit of level setting. So Ripple is a project that's been around for, I don't know how many years it's been around now.
A while now.
A long time, yeah. So several years, 3-4 years. It's as a project, there's been less contributions over the course of the last year or so, as both it was kind of matured and there kind of became the vision for Cordova browser platform to kind of live alongside it. But effectively, what Ripple is it's a simulator that lives inside of Chrome. It basically displays all of your application data inside of an iframe, inside of the Chrome instance. From here, it does kind of intercept all of the kind of plugin calls and provides in some scaffolding and some polyfills that kind of fakes out any of the plugin responses. So it already fakes out some of the most common plugins like, I don't know, accelerometer, and I think you can even trigger a shake event. Oh, actually, the shake event's super fun. Check it out. It shakes it. Shake your money maker. The basic idea is that you would use Chrome, particularly if you're targeting Android or iOS, because, well, hey, Chrome is a WebKit-based or sort of WebKit-ish based browser. It is not as good if you care about Windows as a target, just because WebKit is not IE, is not Trident. So for that, you're probably going to want to debug against a Windows target. But let's face it, these days there are less and less differences between IE and Chrome, both in terms of JavaScript APIs and in terms of CSS behavior. So even then, it's a pretty gosh darn good proxy. That it also keeps you inside of the web browser is kind of nice, because the web browser makers have all invested thousands and millions of man hours in little tiny performance optimizations to make it really, really fast to refresh. So while today Ripple does require a rebuild under most circumstances, there are some ways that you can rig it so that you can get kind of a live reload type of experience. But at the very least, it's pretty fast, especially when compared to something like an emulator. Oh God, the emulators. So yeah, that's about that.
And in Visual Studio, we look at it as when you're doing kind of your more traditional web developer workflow, Ripple's the perfect spot to start, and you can kind of get your single page app up and running, and then start moving on and layering in more advanced device capabilities, some of which may be platform specific or platform agnostic, and then you'll use some of the other stuff you're going to show.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a kind of a good point to kind of stop. I did mention in sort of casually the Cordova browser platform. The Cordova browser platform first really kind of officially became available in Cordova 4.0 this last week. We're really looking at the Cordova browser platform as being a possible location where you could do some of the same things that you do inside of Ripple today, but without kind of all of the Chrome that lives kind of beside it, and it not being embedded inside of that iframe. So if anyone here is interested in use of Ripple or Cordova browser platform and the kind of benefits, disadvantages of both, that's a conversation that we as a product team and as contributors to Cordova are very interested in. So we'd love to hear your opinions on it. Cool, awesome. All right, so I promised that we would add in some plugins. I'm going to stop debugging over here in Visual Studio. Promised that we would add in some plugins, and then let's deploy to a different target. For this one, I kind of want to use another project that's a little bit more exciting than Hello World. So if you guys don't mind, I'll skip over to a different project. You'll see it's a totally silly project. There's not a whole lot going on in it. All right, let's go over here. Oh yeah, this is it. Totally sweet. Okay, so we're going to add in a couple of plugins. So for plugins, we've got I'll call it, a GUI, a visual designer that lives on top of the config.xml. I realize that that's super blurry, but you guys are going to have to trust me. That says config.xml. That's the normal config.xml that you'd expect for any typical Cordova project. And over here, once again, I recognize that it's a little bit blurry, but basically, you've got editors for all of the most common sort of attributes and properties that you would find in config.xml. Things like the display name, the app name, the actual version of your app. And we've got a couple of different other areas here like domain access, packaging, stuff that you would use when, you're configuring your app, predictably enough. Yeah. For the next release, we've actually done a pretty, I would go so far as to say radical update to this to expose even more properties and more attributes. This is another place where, because config.xml is such a monolithic file, and there's potential for so many different attributes and properties, we certainly haven't kind of provided a GUI for all of them. And this is another place where if you have input or feedback of like things that you want to see visual editors for, because it's just a pain in the rear to edit the XML, let us know. That does not mean under any circumstance that you cannot actually edit the text for it. You just kind of right-click, edit code. Yes. And then from here, you can, yoink. There we go. From here, you can still edit the code. And you'll notice that our config.xml, it's fundamentally still just the normal one that you'd expect. We've just added in a couple of extra nodes that take a look kind of like this guy right here, right? And this one hasn't been populated with anything yet, but this is kind of our way of inserting some IDE-specific attributes, and in such a way that for a normal Cordova build, if you were to take it outside of Visual Studio, should still work just fine. Yep. The Cordova build will just ignore it.
And for those of you that are familiar with the CLI, effectively any additional IDE features we're trying to do in the form of Cordova hooks, so they effectively run right in the CLI itself rather than having extra work. We're not quite there all the way yet, but that's definitely our intent kind of in the long term, is to stay as close as possible to that CLI.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is, I think, captured in our name. We are trying to be tools for Apache Cordova. We're not trying to be a separate project type of any kind. This is just intended really to be an IDE experience that maybe makes it a little bit easier for you to do some of the common actions that you would do in a text editor plus browser, right? And adds a little bit of that extra goodness in terms of advanced debugging tools, and we'll actually get to it in a second, IntelliSense as well. Okay, cool. I feel like I had a large digression because I really wanted to tell you guys about plugins. All right, so let's actually do a plugin here. So in this particular case, I'm going to add in a plugin for the accelerometer and a plugin for the camera. I forget if if this is the one that works or not. Yeah, I think this one is. We'll give this a try. So I've just added in, we've got this list here. I know it's blurry, so it may be a little bit difficult for some folks to read. This list is the top 20 or so what are often called core or common plugins. We, as a product team, spend time vetting these plugins and actively working with MS Open Tech to contribute to these plugins to make sure not only that they have kind of the broadest range of platform support possible, but also that they work with kind of the current kind of third-party dependency configuration that Visual Studio uses. When I say third-party dependency configuration, what I mean is the specific version of Node, the specific version of the Android SDK, the specific version of everything that's in there. We've really worked very hard not just to kind of make sure that we're covering our bases in terms of the plugins that we expose, but also that those plugins are trustworthy kind of in an enterprise sense. Obviously, a lot of Visual Studio's customers are kind of enterprise, large corporations where kind of not just the support matrix is important, but also what those plugins expose in terms of security requirements, in terms of localization, etc. So, all right, cool. So we just added a couple plugins. What's going to happen on the CLI side of things?
So effectively, if you think about this, we're about to hit build, and we've queued up a series of commands. And if we had started from ground zero, and in fact, if you clean, this will actually happen. We will automatically create the project. We'll add the appropriate platform. We'll add each of the plugins you've selected, and essentially prepare everything, and then fire off a build and launch it in whatever device target you're going after. So there's a series of rapid set of commands that we fire off in rapid succession from plug-in add to the actual build and emulate and run commands. And so fundamentally, that's what's happening underneath the hood, and you'll, I'm sure, fire that off.
Let's
and
actually
see it
do
working.
it. All right, so I'm going to do it to an Android device here that I've got connected. I really kind of wish that I had one of those fancy new Nexuses, but I've just got one of the Nexus 7s. And actually, for this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to launch up Mobizen while I'm doing this. Anyone else use Mobizen? No? It's a nice little kind of app that allows you to screencast from your attached device to your desktop if you're in the business of doing demos. Mobizen, M-O-B-I-Z-E-N. I receive no compensation and I'm not affiliated in any way with Mobizen.
Have to go get Jason to do his LCA thing.
It's kind of like Miracast, right? But near as I can tell, I've not actually tried this, but I think I can, even without it being tethered via USB, that it can find the device some magic way. I've only been using it for a week, and so I found it helpful so far. It allows me not just to, oh, sorry, I'm gonna have to remember my username and password here real quick. No one look. I think that was it. Nope, that wasn't it.
Try the next one.
Yeah, sweet, here it comes. All right. Okay, cool. So that's going to connect. I just want you guys to be able to see kind of what's actually happening on the screen here. All right, yeah, see, so now I'm connected, and that's my device, and I'll actually make it a little bit bigger. Yes, a newer version's available. I haven't updated yet. All right, cool. All right, hopefully I'm using the right, we go to device. So all I'm doing here, so every time that we do this, we have the play button up there. Gosh, I wish it wasn't so blurry. And then there is this drop down right here. This, if you can't read it, it just says basically Android, iOS, or a bunch of different Windows options. And then over here, it is debug versus distribution and release, and then configuration manager. So this is basically just kind of giving you different options for the way that you, I'll get you in 1 second. Different options for the way that you're doing it. So is it a Cordova emulate command? Is it a Cordova run command? What have you?
Yep.
And Olivia, you had a question?
Actually, you want to tune down the resolution to that face?
I can try. Let's see.
YouTube messed up with it, but for people to see better.
Yeah, totally. We're going to give it a try. Screen resolution. I think it's because it's the, yeah. We're going to give it a try, though. Let's see what happens.
If you're in full screen mode, it should work. Yeah.
Well, is that better? All right, I have a much narrower space, but that's okay. If it makes it more legible, then everyone's a winner.
It's on the Mac.
Oh, it's on the Mac side.
Yeah. Yes, if it wasn't already obvious, we work fine inside of Parallels on a Mac.
Yeah. I can try it real quick. Really? Let's try scaled, maybe? Crunch, crunch. Better? Better? Okay. All right, a little bit less blurry. We're going to go with that. Okay. So, say okay, sure. All right, a little bit better. Now, hopefully we can see. All right, so as promised, let's actually deploy to our device here. All right, so as it's doing that build, it is, of course, kind of going out. It's getting all the plugins that it needed. In this case, getting them, I think, from plugins.cordova.io. Oh, let's bring up Mobizen. Of course, now it's got to reconnect. Come on. There we go. I'm going to stop that for just a sec. I want to make sure that I got the right stuff here, so I'm going to File, New, Project, App, X, say OK. I'm going to do a quick copy and paste here to make sure I got the right stuff. I think it was in here. Yoink. Yes to all. Config. Plugins. Accelerometer. Camera. Save. And let's go to device. Is Mobizen working? Yes, it is. Close. Go. All right, so at this point, we're actually attaching to the Android device, and it's going to build here for us. Hopefully we can all see. Oh, Cordova build. It happened so quickly. All right, cool. Everyone, welcome to the new awesome social app of the conference. This is Godzilla. It is a Godzilla family photo album. I will be taking all of your pictures later on. The basic idea is that you pretend to be Godzilla, and that's it. All right, so here we go. You're the lucky person in front. Give me your best Godzilla. Rawr. Perfect. That was pretty good. Yeah, that was good. Awesome. That was good. All right. And now you're in Godzilla's family photo album, right? All right. So this is clearly, other than your impression of Godzilla, no heroic achievement of code or anything like that. But really kind of what I wanted to show here is that deploying to an attached or a tethered device is pretty gosh darn easy. And once you're there, you can kind of come back in here, and just like we did with Ripple, you can still use the exact same debugging tools that you used elsewhere. And in this case, I happen to put just kind of the base 64 encoded image up there, in there, right? But this is, you know, I can make changes in here. I can change stuff just like I would anywhere else. So I can turn this from Godzilla into Godzilla Photo Fun. Right? And it changes it there for me automatically. The exact same kind of thing that you'd expect from any of the browser development tools. And I've got inspection. Oh, thank you very much. Photo Fun. Cool. All right. And the last little bit that I want to show you guys before we actually spend some honest-to-God workshop time, maybe even playing with some of the bits, is how it works with iOS. So clearly, I've been using kind of Parallels in order to deploy to all of my apps and to kind of use Visual Studio. So what happens when you want to build for iOS? Well, as you guys know, it requires use of the native build systems in order to build for each of the targets. So actually, as it happens, working on a Mac in Parallels happens to be a really kind of ideal configuration because on my Windows instance, I have, of course, the Windows build systems. I can also there install the Android SDK, and then I can use Parallels and the Mac side of things to build via Xcode. One little bit that I want to point out, if you guys do try to use kind of Visual Studio today, it is not compatible with Xcode 6 just yet. This next release that we have coming in the very, very near future will rectify that problem, but for today it is kind of using Xcode, was it 5.1.1?
5.1 was
Yeah.
what we recommend.
One.
There was a patch that went out that should get it to work, but we've tested against 5.1.1 for this particular release.
All right, cool. So for this, I'm just going to bring up Terminal. And so from within Terminal, I'm going to start up this remote build agent that we've got that's called VSMDA Remote. So for this, all that I've done before, kind of you see what I've got here on screen, is that I've got Node installed, of course, on my Mac instance, and I've installed an NPM package called VSMDA Remote. Once I've got VSMDA Remote installed, I just need to start it up. And at this point, the Mac side of my machine is going to start listening for a build package from Visual Studio. Of course, Visual Studio needs to know where to look, right? Like what is the Mac that's going to be listening out for me? And so for that, I either need to tell Visual Studio what my IP address is, or in this case, I can just grab the IP address from there, or I can also use it when I've got Parallels instance installed. Because it's on the same machine, I can just use the name of my machine. So in fact, that's what I've done over here. We're going to stop debugging now. Goodbye, Godzilla.
And effectively, while he's doing that, the way to think about VSMDA Remote is it's effectively a remote CLI command runner. So effectively what's happening is we're packaging up a CLI project with everything that needs to happen, shipping it off to the Mac, and then running the last mile to get that iOS build to happen and to do other things that you can only do from a Mac. So it's designed to be lightweight, easy to use, and it's a simple NPM package that you can install.
Totally. All right. Cool. So what I've done here in Visual Studio, I just went to Tools, Options. Within Tools, Options, there's an option there for multi-device hybrid apps. That is kind of our old name. It was much longer than Tools for Apache Cordova, and we just really kind of wanted to pledge allegiance to the Apache Cordova. So from here, there's an option, and I just kind of tell it, hey, the instance of the Mac that's going to be listening for builds is, okay, the name of my machine is Godzilla. And then I tell it to listen on port 3000. I could also give it the IP address of my Mac if that is not running in Parallels or it's, somewhere else, right? So we're just going to say, okay. Now VSMDA Remote should be listening, and we're going to build over to it. So for that, I'm going to change the platform that I'm building for. I'm going to change it to say that I want to build for iOS, and I'm going to say that I want to build over to a simulator. Start that guy up. We're doing the exact same build that we did before, but this time, can I see it? Whoopsie. Back over. Should be queuing it up. Yep. It's getting the package right now. And in just a moment, you'll see the simulator come up. Now, for that one, we actually didn't execute any other commands. At this point, we're just straight up building, right?
Yeah, what we actually do is we pull in, since you can't actually even add the iOS platform on Windows, what we actually do is we ship a CLI project without any platforms installed, but all the plugins and everything ready, ship it over to the Mac, add the iOS platform, and then run.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you've played with the Cordova CLI and you go over to the this is literally the equivalent. In fact, we can even go look at it of a CLI project, and then under Platforms iOS, there's an Xcode project sitting right there. And so even in this case, if we get into some weird situation where you really have to do that debugging in native code and Xcode, you can actually get to that project on this Mac. So it's
Let's do it. Where would I go to for that? Yeah?
sure. Where's your build folder?
That's a great
Depends on
question.
where you configure
I don't know where I put my build folder at. Let's see here. Let's just go Finder. Oops. Finder. Oh, for the love of God. Yeah, there we go. Let's see where it might be at.
Probably builds.
Remote builds?
There.
Yeah.
And then your build number was
Build number
3421.
3421.
So there's Cordova app. That's the Cordova CLI project right there. Now if you go under Platforms iOS, there it is.
Right there. Xcode project.
Open that guy up and it's actually an Xcode project.
Open. Let's try open that guy.
And if you're not familiar with the Cordova CLI, the exact same thing happens with Android.
All right. I'm not going to install the additional components right now.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I want.
The exact same thing happens with Android. And even one of the conscious decisions we made with Visual Studio is we didn't want to deviate. So even when you're building for Windows Store and Windows Phone, a Visual Studio project is actually created underneath the covers that is the native project. You can go and use that and do native tools. But we wanted to be able to stay as close as possible to the CLI. And as the CLI adapts and adds in new features, we're able to kind of go along with that. And so Olivier kind of showed some of the new capabilities that came out with 3.6.3 and 4.0 with the Windows platform. That actually has multiple Visual Studio projects underneath the covers that it's using to deal with the fact that it's a different binary that has to get created for Windows 8 versus 8.1 versus Phone 8.1. So by having that abstraction, we actually have a really great way for developers to be able to use the CLI and Visual Studio from a single project and hit a number of different targets. So anyway.
Cool. Yeah.
Bit of a digression. But
No, absolutely. That's good stuff. So once again, this is a conversation. This is a workshop, not a podium talk, right? So if you got other questions, like toss them out. Yeah.
Is there an ability to add plugins apart from those 20 plugins that are?
Yeah, so the question was, is there an ability to add like custom plugins, right? Absolutely. So I'm going to give you the today answer, and then there's a separate in a couple of weeks answer, right? So
timing of conferences doesn't
Yes,
always work out.
doesn't
We'll
always
just put it
work
that way.
So back over here in the config. So the easiest way to do it is to edit the code over here, and then you just add in a new line here with the location of the custom plugin that you're looking for, along with the version of it, right? And so, in fact, for any of these that we've already added in, let's say that I don't want camera version 0.3.0, right? I could say I want 0.28, and just by changing here, or I could reference a different custom plugin from there as well.
Yeah, and in fact, we've also got the ability, if you add a plugins folder to the project, one of the things we've done is set things up so that you can do basic plugin development in VS. Basically, by adding the plugins folder, you can add a subfolder underneath that, put your plugin code, edit it, and what we do behind the scenes is actually uninstall and reinstall the plugin on each build so that your changes actually show up. The normal CLI, you actually have to do that by hand. And so that's something we're trying to make sure happens too. So you can even just grab off your local file system and pull it in that way, if you'd prefer. So you've got a number of different options, and like you said, we're going to make it even better coming up.
And so in a few weeks, what you can imagine is that instead of kind of doing the code editing here, not that there's anything wrong with the code editing, that's perfectly okay, but you can point to either a Git repository or to, let's say, a zip file on disk, and we'll automatically import it in for you. And that would be through the more, I'm going to Control Z out of that, through the more kind of visual interface here. And so you have a few more options that way.
Yep.
Awesome.
Can you
Cool.
tell me more about how you can potentially debug on iOS?
Yeah, so the question was, can I tell them a little bit more about how you'd eventually debug on iOS? And the beautiful thing about that is that it is the exact same process that we used for debugging to this tethered device or to Ripple, or I haven't shown you an emulator, like an Android emulator, but or even for that matter, a Windows thing. Really, all that you do is when you build to iOS, you choose debug from this menu, and then automatically, depending upon whether or not you've chosen simulator or some other tethered device, it would automatically connect the debugger, and from that point, you can set breakpoints. You can, I haven't set a breakpoint, but that's maybe a good thing for us to do. Let's actually do that.
Is that specifically for a tethered device?
It is not specifically, you can do it for the simulator as well.
Yes, then do I have to switch to the parallel?
You do. So when I have done this before, what I've done is I've used coherence mode in Parallels. And coherence mode essentially allows you to treat Windows, if that makes sense, as Mac windows. And so there's not actually like a separate workspace that's defined for Windows and a separate workspace for Mac. All the windows intermingle in a happy land where windows are friends. And so you don't have to actually kind of do that entire workspace switching between the two. Does that make sense?
I mean,
Yeah, I can actually do it right here. I can do it. Let's see if I can go into coherence mode. I forget if I have to start
with
that way.
CTP2 right now, we don't have the debugger wired in, as Ryan was saying earlier. So with what's coming, it will. We're actually securing the connection, number one, from
think I might actually
the
have to
Mac
pause.
to the PC. So that'll actually be encrypted, an encrypted channel. But then we also are able to connect the Visual Studio debugger through the PC over to VSMDA remote and the simulator or an attached tethered device on your Mac. And so all of that, you basically have a nice single spot where you can do all your debugging. You also have the option, if you don't want to do that, you can basically start without debugging.
Yeah.
And then you could use something like Safari or Chrome if you wanted to as well. So we don't prevent you from doing that, but the debugger provides this nice single spot for you to always go to kind of do your diagnostics and debugging.
Yeah.
I want to say this, are you cobbling together tools to make this happen, or is this a fully Microsoft supported?
In so much as we are doing tooling for Apache Cordova and all of the different build systems require, Apache Cordova requires multiple different build systems, and you have to use Node, and you got to use a wide range of different tools. This is not end-to-end Microsoft stack. We are definitely we are serving as the glue to bring all of the different third-party dependencies together.
That's right.
And we are doing the validation to make sure that all of those different dependencies absolutely sing together. And we do that both through just kind of validation and testing, through community contributions. So when we find that the kind of parts of the tool chain don't sing together, we go out there, we file a bug, we write some code, we issue a pull request and say, hey, we can make this better. We can create a coherent ecosystem that doesn't feel like I'm using a bunch of different tools, but feels like I'm actually using a single.
Will there ever be a Visual Studio for Mac?
That's a great question.
We'd love to know that too.
Yeah. The question was, will there ever be a Visual Studio for Mac? And certainly we hear from customers that they want to be able to use Visual Studio features in a Mac environment without Parallels. And we are exploring ways that we can bring that to a Mac, but we are not in a place where I think that the company is committed to taking what is a ginormous code base. I mean, Visual Studio's been around for more than 15 years, 20 years.
Time. Yeah, I don't
but that's a big code base. And so I think the question is probably more like, will we be able to bring Visual Studio features to a Mac and to kind of fulfill end-to-end kind of developer workflows on a Mac, rather than will we do a full port of everything that is Visual Studio? There are editions of Visual Studio that are out there today that are absolutely free and do not require like an MSDN subscription or any of that kind of stuff. It's called the Express SKUs. We're looking at ways to kind of make Visual Studio as a whole more affordable to the open source community. So I think that, stay tuned for exciting news there, but I would not say that we're in a place where we're going to bring the entire kind of IDE into a Mac environment.
One of the things we are definitely exploring is command line workflows integrated with Visual Studio, and how alternate editors can actually be used and integrated in with this as well. And so one of the things we're definitely interested in is what editors people use on a Mac and how they would want to potentially have a project that some folks are using Visual Studio for, and others, maybe your designers, are actually on Macs and need to be able to do some CSS editing and some basic stuff, but aren't doing the hardcore kind of engineering work, and kind of have that interop be as seamless as possible. So that's something we're also taking a look at to kind of help with some of those types of problems in the interim.
Yeah.
Do we have any solutions for, once your app is deployed, to help capture the JavaScript failures?
Talking about like telemetry and analytics?
I want to repeat the question. The question was, do we have any systems, tools in place to, once your app is deployed, and that means like in customers' hands, I assume, to actually capture JavaScript errors, application crashes, things like that? Yeah, so like an analytics service, effectively.
Like APM tools can generally capture a full application crash, but if something goes awry in the JavaScript,
Yeah. So we do not today have any telemetry services that we are making available for Cordova projects and hybrid apps. It is something that we are definitely looking at because clearly there's a need for it, right? I mean, like clearly there's a need for it. But it's nothing that Microsoft offers today. So, yeah. I did want to circle back around. You had a question about coherence mode, and can you see it? Unfortunately, you actually have to start the instance of the VM in order to show parallels. So after the talk, I'd be more than happy to shut down and start back up and show it to you. But it's kind of cool.
Yep.
Can I do it from
You can
up
do
here?
it up there. Yeah.
View? Yeah,
Enter
it's
coherence.
disabled. That's what I'm saying. You actually have to exit full
Exit full
screen,
screen
and
and then-
then can I do it?
Yep.
Ah, look at this. I'm learning stuff. Oh, sweet. There we go. I need to share. Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, I'll enable shared applications.
Think.
Wah, wah. Okay, yeah, cool. So yeah, now I've got, my Windows folder in line with my Mac thing. So it's all operating.
If you go down to the dashbar,
Yep. Yeah, and
you
so
can see.
I can see what's in Parallels versus what's actually natively kind of running on my Mac.
where you set up that you could run to the iOS simulator.
Yeah, so like what I would do here, let's actually do it. Let's do it. All right, so I'm gonna deploy to my iOS simulator here.
Yeah, and if the simulator's up,
It's not.
it's not up. Okay,
Not up.
It
All right,
actually
I'm
should
gonna
pop up on top of Visual Studio. if
Go
it's
ahead
not
and
up.
close some of these guys.
Oh, it is up
It
already.
is up. That's all right. Well, it'll relaunch. So now I've got Visual Studio there, and wherever my simulator
There
is,
it is.
here it is. And here's my simulator, kind of side by side. And it's obviously finishing redeploying there. And so what I would do here is I would just yoink. Yeah, make this guy a little bit smaller. Do its thing there. Apparently it's having trouble deploying for some reason. Okay, I must have changed something in the code while I was tinkering around. But you get the idea, right? I've got the iOS simulator up side by side with Visual Studio, and there I can just kind of debug, treat it just like I would any other thing. Yeah, just like I was in Ripple, right? One window side by side, or if I've got two monitors, I can put one up on the secondary monitor and actually have my coding environment in the kind of the primary monitor, right? All right, and so kind of maybe the last thing to show here, okay, hopefully I didn't actually totally hork my project by tinkering around with it. I'm going to exit out of coherence mode because I've never actually tried to deploy to a Windows one in coherence mode.
It works. I've done
Does it
this.
really?
Yes.
Mind blown. Absolutely blown.
Go back into full screen.
Yeah. View, enter full screen. And I wonder what I screwed up in my project. Did I do something in config? View code. No, I think I left it out. All right, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens when we deploy to Windows. So in this particular case, I'm going to deploy to Windows. And what I'm doing here, I could deploy to a tethered Windows device. I could deploy to, is it working? Yeah, okay, good. Hey, Godzilla. So I could deploy to a tethered device. I could deploy to the simulator. In this particular case, I'm deploying to the actual local machine. That is kind of one of the interesting, nice things about kind of the Windows ecosystem is that you can deploy HTML apps and have them work like on the desktop as full screen apps. So in this particular case, I've got my app deployed there, and what I can do, oopsie, is I can actually now just kind of dock that guy over here. And just as I was doing before, now I can debug against it and I can inspect from here, right? And so debug, inspect, I can kind of select different objects. And actually for this particular one, let's go ahead and, I'm actually gonna set a breakpoint here. So I'm gonna set a breakpoint back in one of my, I gotta find my Solution Explorer. Hello,
Probably pushed up the
thank you,
side, yep.
I got it. Cool. I'm going to set a breakpoint in.
Seems
actually,
like a joke. How many PMs does it take to set a breakpoint?
Oh, so many, so many. All right, we'll set one in device ready here, and then I'm going to.
Let's do a window reload.
Yeah, I'm going to do a window reload.
Button.
Let's close this guy down. Yoink. Stop it. Deploy to local. And here, right away, I kind of get a breakpoint. And from here, one of the nice things is I can actually kind of like inspect and do all the normal things you'd expect out of kind of an IDE, where you're able to set breakpoints and actually inspect the value of objects at runtime. And so this works, to be clear, I'm showing it in Windows. This works equally well when deploying to an Android device or soon to be an iOS device. So I can actually, like, I can see what's in the camera object here. In fact, let's kind of go here. I can see what's in documents. I can scroll down and inspect all the different properties, attributes, and methods that are available in that object, making it super, super helpful when I'm trying to actually kind of figure out kind of what's going wrong and why a particular attribute maybe is undefined or why a particular method is failing, that kind of thing. Awesome. All right, cool. I think that's all that I got to kind of do is my.
Do you want to talk
whirlwind
about
demo.
TypeScript at all?
TypeScript, yeah, absolutely. So Olivier kind of intimated just a little bit earlier that we also have TypeScript support from within Visual Studio. TypeScript, I think we did a raise of hands before. Any TypeScript users? Couple, yeah, a few, awesome. So the basic idea behind TypeScript is that it's a strongly typed superset of JavaScript, which means that you kind of, do exactly what you do in a strongly typed language. You declare that a particular variable is going to be an integer or a string or whatever else it's going to be. And that really, really helps in terms of both code cleanliness, maintainability, and readability, particularly when you've got an open source project and you potentially have contributions coming from a lot of different contributors. And maybe like it's kind of a pain in the butt to know if there's to read through all of their code and to know what exactly is going on, whether or not there's any potential errors there. And TypeScript provides kind of an extra level of insurance or extra safeguard there where you can know at the very least from first blush, hey, this guy actually compiles, it actually builds. And so there's a certain sanity check that you can perform there just to make sure that the application, at least in theory, kind of all compiles and works together. The other nice thing is that it provides an extra level of IntelliSense that's around it. And so I'm actually just going to kind of do a file new off of this. New. Dan, you use a lot of TypeScript, don't you?
Yeah, I use it all the time. It's saved me a lot of headaches over the last few months.
Here we go. New, we're going to call this one Typey.
And TypeScript's integrated into Visual Studio itself, and the debugger automatically works with it, so you can actually set breakpoints inside of TypeScript files, just like you'd expect, and,
Cool.
And that works as well.
So kind of what I want to point out here, and Dan, I will encourage you to kind of speak up here, but module Typey, that's awesome. This looks an awful lot like JavaScript. Like, this is not the kind of thing that there's a really high learning curve to move from JavaScript to TypeScript. It's actually pretty gentle, and also kind of within TypeScript, since it is a superset of JavaScript, you can write just plain old vanilla JavaScript inside of any TypeScript file, and it will work just fine.
And you'll in fact notice, if you look carefully, that's pretty much all we've done here. There's no, not any particularly, no special typings. We're just calling the standard JavaScript, add event listener on the document object. So even though we've kind of set it up as a TypeScript project, we've got these module and export things, which are obviously not standard JavaScript, but the actual functions themselves are right now just using pure JS. There's no particularly strong typing going on or anything interesting like that.
Awesome. Cool.
There can be.
But there can be. But there can be. For those of you that might not have caught it, Dan here is Canadian. It's pronounced JavaScript in Canada. Awesome. Cool. All right. So with that, I'm going to kind of bring up some of the same. Actually, let's go back to slide deck time. Do you guys want to see anything else in the product until we actually kind of start playing with it? Good. Yeah. All right. Cool. So here, if you've not already gone and grabbed it, we do have VMs available for everyone. You can just go to AKMS PG Day, thank you, VM, and we have got a grand total, I believe, of like 70 different VMs that are available. Those are good for the next week. And then if you've got kind of any needs over and above that, there are Azure hosted VMs that you can get really easily. Actually, just search for Cordova Azure hosted VM, and you'll find a blog post on it telling you how to get them. But for today, these are kind of primed and ready to go for you. Username Cascadia.js. Yes, we borrowed from a previous conference that we went to. If you haven't been to Cascadia.js, highly recommend it. And then password super secure @SSWRD. Like I said, there are 70 there to choose from. You're kind of just pick them at random. I think we maybe used about 7 of them in the last session, maybe 8 or 9. So maybe pick a number above 10. Let's see, we already talked about the targets that we can go to. If you are building for Windows, a couple of things to point out. In Cordova versions 3.6 and below, well, 3.4 to 3.6, I think. It builds a Windows 8 project. In Windows 4.0, if you are interested in targeting Windows projects, this is the moment at which we've introduced, in partnership with MS OpenTech and the rest of the Cordova community, we introduced support for Windows Universal projects, and that is support for Windows 8.1. A big kind of differentiating point there is that in Cordova, the Windows 8 implementation of a Cordova project is really a Silverlight project with a web view inside of it. As we moved on to Windows 8.1, it is a native JavaScript project. And so it is a slightly different architecture. That means a slightly different range of capabilities as well. There is not a way to debug against a Windows Phone 8.0 project. The debugger can attach to it, but you can debug against a Windows 8.1 project since it is a native JavaScript project. It is limitation of the tooling that's available to us today and kind of the platform architecture. Okay, so I gave you the kind of the URL to download them. We've got so many different members of the product team here today available to help answer questions, help you get going on kind of using the projects. I would love to sit down with any one of you and just like see what it's like to port one of your projects over, even a Hello World app. So please invite us over to have conversation and just kind of look at what code you're doing. Would love to geek out about it. In each of those VMs, there are code samples available, an Angular one, a Backbone one, and a WinJS one. I got to tell you, I am from Microsoft, and so obviously I have some bias, but I was kind of going into HTML5 DevCon earlier in the week thinking that Ionic was the bee's knees. My opinion has not changed. Ionic is still the bee's knees, but I was super duper impressed with the performance of WinJS. Like on a list with 10,000 items, I was like scrolling as hard as I could, trying to get that thing to screw up, and it wouldn't do it. And that it actually beat out hands down Ionic in terms of performance. So still, like Ionic is cool. I'm super excited for what those guys are doing, but there's other cool stuff happening, and I think that WinJS is worth a look. I do want to spend kind of a last minute kind of up here on stage, kind of telling you where we're going with this. I would be kind of obtuse of me to not tell you, open by saying that we're in a kind of an early CTP alpha release, and then not follow that up by telling you kind of where we're going and where we're taking this. So independent of what you see on the screen, we do expect to get to kind of a 1.0 or a release to market very soon. What I mean by very soon, think 2015, probably springish time frame. And we will get there faster the more feedback that we get from people like you. So like, it needs to be a conversation between the product team and the community, because we are part of the community, and like the only way that we can bring a product to market and make it what you want it to be is if you tell us what you want it to be. So please have conversations with us there. We are, in order to kind of make all of this possible, really trying to kind of make significant contributions to the community. Some ones that we've already made so far through partnership with MS Open Tech is kind of to the medic testing kind of units. We're really trying to improve support matrix for the most popular plugins and, for that matter, the platforms themselves. Clearly, we have a vested interest in increasing support for the Windows platform, but we're also very interested in in kind of improving the security and reliability of the other platforms as well with them. Okay, my pet project right now is thinking about Ripple and the Cordova browser platform. So staying in the browser longer, that's all about the Cordova browser platform. Like thinking about ways that we can make it so that developers can move from taking simple websites and progressively enhancing them to make them into hybrid applications. And a lot of that means kind of like building your web application inside of the browser first, and then just kind of incrementally adding on Cordova functionality. We also, over the next 6 months, intend to invest considerably in interoperability with other tools. That means taking a look at the myriad variety of CLIs that are out there. Yes, there's the Cordova CLI today, but there's also the PhoneGap CLI. There's also the Ionic CLI. There's also, does Telerik in the back, do you guys have a CLI?
Yep.
No? Yeah?
Yeah, they do.
Do? Yes? Like there's a bunch of different CLIs out there, and it's great that there's differentiation, but there needs to be differentiation based upon a standard, and so finding some sort of common ground with all the different tool sets out there in terms of a CLI is really important to us. We also care about interoperability with other frameworks. Ionic is a great example of that, not in WinJS and Angular and Backbone and React and all those guys. We want to make sure that as an IDE, we're kind of capitalizing on the strengths of an IDE, and that means awesome IntelliSense for these frameworks and easy kind of easy acquisition of the frameworks through things like Grunt and Bower and Yeoman. And then finally, better coding and debug experiences. I've talked already about IntelliSense for the popular frameworks and TypeScript. On the debug side of things, I've also talked a little bit about iOS and the debugging that we'll bring there. So that'll really kind of like bring kind of even distribution between some of the major platforms that are out there, Android, iOS, and Windows, with an eye in the future possibly towards BlackBerry as well. And that's our short-term roadmap. I know that sounds like a lot for the short term, but that's because well, we're working long hours and we care deeply about the project. So join with us in kind of making that project as awesome as it can be, Cordova as a whole. And from here, I'm kind of encourage us all to, we've got another 20 minutes or so that have been allocated for this. We would love to have a conversation with you about kind of how to use the tools with your own project, give you some one-on-one help and support, or we've all prepared a song and dance that we'd like to perform for you here.
Take it away, Dan.
Yeah, take it away, Dan. No, that's all that I got. So questions from here? Yeah?
What version of Visual Studio do you
Yeah, so right now we're on Visual Studio 2013. Technically speaking, there are CTPs available for all of the updates, but the most recent one is Update 3. You get progressively more functionality as the CTPs go along, and each CTP does have a dependency on the update before it. I realize that was a complicated answer, but just get the latest VS Update 3, and VS will kind of prompt you to do it. As time goes on, one of the things that we're kind of really wrestle with is, I talked earlier about wanting to make sure that the entire stack of toolchain dependencies kind of really all sing together and they all work really well together. In the Visual Studio world and for enterprises, we've been accustomed to a model where as time goes on and older versions of Visual Studio are out there, we issue kind of backwards compatible patches for them, right? And so there's still patches being issued for Visual Studio 2008 or something like that, 10, right? But that's, for the vast majority of these kind of open source projects that are out there, that's just not how they update. They update by doing a new version, do a new release.
Go forward.
Go forward, exactly. And so a big part of kind of the way that we're thinking about things is because Visual Studio is the glue that holds together a larger kind of toolchain. We will probably end up adopting something that looks like a roll forward model as well, specifically for the tools for Apache Cordova. I'm not making a statement here about Visual Studio at large. I'm just making a statement about the tools for Apache Cordova. So you'll always want the latest bits, and hey, we're developers, we like to be on the latest bits. Yeah.
Is Microsoft contributing to like TypeScript, or are you just sharing information?
Yeah. So the question is Microsoft contributing to TypeScript? The answer to that question is a definitive yes. It's actually our team that builds TypeScript.
Yep.
So it was also a self-serving comment, but we also think it's awesome, right? No, we
Thank you for
actually.
asking.
Question, so are there certain applications where maybe it's still not the right place to put in Cordova, Apache?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So the question was, are there some instances, some application types that are not appropriate for Apache Cordova apps or hybrid apps at large? And the clear answer is yes. There are entire classes of applications that are not suitable for hybrid application development. If I were to sit down and write a first-person shooter where I need to, when I hit the screen, it fires at the monster that's coming at me, I would not use a hybrid application. If I were to build anything that requires super fast exploding graphics and animations and eye candy, right? If you are doing certainly any type of enterprise app, but I will generalize it more. I always kind of hate classifying as enterprise apps. If you're creating an app that you would be comfortable releasing as a web application, that is fundamentally, I'll call it transactional in kind of in its purpose. So I am entering in data, I am receiving data, I am consuming content, where content is video, audio, and certainly written word and images. Hybrid apps are great. They're a wonderful choice for that kind of thing. Not just because the web is uniquely suited to kind of sending and exchanging data, but because hybrid apps compared to native apps for those types of applications are much faster to build. There is a ginormous community of web developers, JavaScript developers, who not only provide lots of great open source software, but HTML as a language, like it's super quick and fast to prototype with. You've got frameworks like Bootstrap out there that make it really easy to create kind of functional applications quickly. Same thing with control frameworks like WinJS and Ionic, or Kendo UI, or what's another one out there? Another control framework. There's lots of them.
There's more
right?
of them.
So if I were making a content-based application and something that I was comfortable deploying as a web app, I would totally go there. If I was making a game, I would probably use native technologies.
It's kind of the between space. It's
Yeah.
something you would traditionally, maybe before mobile would have done as like a, Windows app.
So if the question is, do I build a Cordova app versus a Windows app? Windows apps are a little bit unique in so much as you have your choice of, you have your choice of languages. You can either go with like C++ or C#, or you can go with HTML. It's kind of the same answer that it was even back in the Windows 8 kind of days, where there are some instances where a JavaScript app is going to make sense for you, and some instances where a C# is. Typically, like my kind of like the way that I understand this for myself is I am a JavaScript developer. That's what I'm good at. So that is going to be my first choice no matter what. And if I run up against a limitation of the platform, then I will think about moving on to kind of an alternate solution. And my reasons are like what would motivate me to go to an alternate platform is typically going to be something like it is a graphics intensive application. I can say, having said that what I can say, wow, that's psychedelic.
Yeah, that's okay.
Is that there are a number of game providers out there that are also starting to look at building things using web technologies with success. So I think that the performance divide between hybrid applications and native applications is starting to be erased. Through the work of, iOS 8 now has JIT acceleration compression. Now that we have Crosswalk for Android, we've got kind of we're able to use modern Chrome in older versions of Android. And so there is a lot more, that's right. So there's a lot more capabilities in the modern versions of mobile devices and a lot more horsepower, quite frankly, in modern versions of devices that allow us to create native-like experiences or get native-like performance out of hybrid applications.
I think one of the things I see is that the JavaScript environment is a little bit of a black box. So if my app is not stable in Cordova, is it because it's a hybrid app?
Oh. That's interesting. The comment was that JavaScript kind of feels like a black box, and he's not entirely certain if JavaScript is kind of what's misbehaving or if there's an actual bug in the code. So from my point of view, managed code and native is more of a black box to me because that gets like straight up compiled and it's truly like sealed. JavaScript, I can find out what the state of my application is, the exact state of my application at any moment. And I feel like I've got pretty good, especially with debugging capabilities like you find in Visual Studio, but also in the Chrome Dev Tools and also in the F12 developer tools that give me a lot of transparency into what's happening. I think that where you do find a little bit more of a black box idness, if that's a word, I'm going to coin that right now, is when you get into use of frameworks, right? Because frameworks often, you kind of feed in kind of to the API, and then maybe kind of where you get an error is somewhere deep inside of the framework, and you're not sure if it's the framework's fault or if it's your code's fault. And I think that is a problem that we really kind of need to direct to the framework makers. And we've got an option as application developers to either choose to kind of, be careful about the frameworks that we choose and use the ones that have kind of the most community momentum behind them. Or we can just choose to sling our own JavaScript where we know with confidence that if there's an error, it's our fault,
Well, and then on top of that, the tools for debugging JavaScript are getting better and better every day. I mean, one of the things we've got in Visual Studio is Just My Code, which is essentially intended to try to deal with some of those exact problems.
Yeah.
Asynchronous debugging is getting better when you've got promises and things like that going on. So it definitely, if you look at the state of JavaScript development, heck, 2 years ago, let alone 5, versus today, it's gotten a lot better, and I think there's a lot of momentum behind it in the community. So I think we're starting to see an explosion of interest, as you can see by the number of sponsors and large corporations that are actually here in that kind of development.
So I have a iOS iPad kiosk application, and if it runs for a few days or something like that, all of a sudden, for some fluke, it might be on a white screen and the device is frozen up.
Yeah.
I don't know which direction to start.
Yeah. So.
Not much bugs to detect.
Yeah, so the comment was he has an iOS kiosk app, and if it runs for multiple days, and presumably it's a SPA of some kind, single page application.
Yes.
Yeah. If it runs for several days, it white screens, basically freezes up kind of thing. So single page applications they require, I'm not going to say more attention, but maybe it is. Maybe they require more attention because in a single-page application, you're never really disposing of you've got all the memory garbage problems that you do not have when you have full page teardown and refresh. So my guess would be, we should look at your code and talk about it, but my guess would be you've got a memory leak somewhere, and if it's for several days and there's lots of people interacting with it, over time that memory leak is just growing larger and larger and larger and larger. And there are tools to help you with that. I would recommend, because you're using it for an iOS and an iOS application, there are, for the F12 tools, there are a number of diagnostic tools for memory, UI responsiveness, CPU, network diagnostics that can help you diagnose that. It's going to help you diagnose it in the context of Windows, but I would say that those are going to probably provide pretty good insight that will translate back over to iOS, since the memory leaks are the kind of thing where if it happens in one system, it probably happens in the other system. So you've got some options there. There may be similar tools for iOS. Do you guys know?
Yeah, obviously you can go into Safari, and there are some similar tools there. But I think the key thing is a really common problem is if you're holding on to object references in some caching object, and those aren't getting thrown away, then what Ryan's talking about can happen. Obviously, there could be a native problem too. That's where Xcode comes in, and so you can obviously use the right tool for the job. But I think I would probably start on the JavaScript side, see if that's what's going on, because like Ryan was saying, it seems like something like that is happening. And then if that actually is not what's going on, it may actually be the container itself that's hanging on you, and then that's when you head over to the native side.
Cool. All right. So I think we're about at the end of our time. Thank you guys so much. You've been super awesome. It's really been fun talking to you. You can find us around for the next couple of days. And I'm going to go back here real quick. Don't forget there are VMs available. Please grab them. And we'll see you guys around the conference. Thanks so much.